Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Baseball is a long ways away, at least here in the Northeast Kingdom, but today's topic is the baseball grandstand in Gardner Park. The three fellas here today are here to talk about whether it can be preserved. I will let them introduce themselves.
I'm Roger Kaite, chair of the committee.
I'm Paul Manette, a member of the Gardner Park Restoration Committee.
I'm Jim Johnson, a member of the committee also.
No, so what is the committee called?
This is the Restore the Gardner Park Grandstand Committee.
Right. And we were talking beforehand that the order was given to build it in 1939, and apparently it was built either in 39 or early 40, but we can't find any grand opening for it so far.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of information from back in those days, but the then Mayor Winston Prouty, who we all know well, gave the order to start construction on the grandstand. And we do know that it was several years before it was actually able to be used. So it did take a while, and when it was originally built, Frank Sabrin was one of the major contractors, and it was actually built to be movable.
Oh, really?
So they could move it to a different location, and anybody that's been anywhere near under the grandstand will know that it was sitting on big cement pillars that went from one end to the other, and the main beam could just lift the grandstand up and move it anywhere you wanted to.
So you're talking about anywhere in the park?
Anywhere in the park.
Right. No, I did not know that. And how many decades? Because like I'm going on 56, and I don't recall it being used that much in the last 30 years. Now, you know, as I was telling you beforehand, when it comes to me in baseball, I did do Little League, but I was the one way out in the outfield praying the ball wouldn't come to me. And, you know, in other words, I wasn't a huge sports fanatic. But has it been used that much in the last 20 or 30 years?
Well, I think probably 20 years ago, Doug Swenson was involved with Babe Ruth, and they had a big New England tournament here. And I don't know how much the grandstand itself has been used since then. I do know the ball field has been used quite a bit. Old timers have been over there. Some of the Babe Ruth teams have been there. But the grandstand was closed off because the steps that go up into the grandstand were in disrepair, and they felt that it was a hazard, so they just closed the grandstand off, wouldn't let anybody go in the grandstand.
Right. Now, I'll let one of you answer this, or unless you have to, is what kind of condition, because like I went over there and just peeked around, and you know, I'm not a building contractor. Actually, I rank up with being a builder like I do baseball. You know, I can barely pound a nail straight. But I looked at it and I said, well, it looks, you know, it's obviously cosmetic work, and the actual seating looks great, but how is it really?
Well, I read the engineering report. I emailed it to each of you guys. I got it this morning. And the ends, the north and south, well, each end of it where the weather comes in,
Right.
is kind of rotted,
Right.
where the water comes in and drips down the inside.
Right.
There's posts underneath that are tilted back towards the river, or bowed. They call it bowed, but they're tilted. And those are some of the structural things. I guess the beams, they said, were spliced together instead of being a solid piece. That's the type of thing that is wrong with it now.
Yeah, because the you know, the building codes when in 1939, 1940 are probably vastly different than they are today. So, but is it salvageable?
That's what we're going to try to find out.
Yeah, I think
We don't know. That's what we're here for.
yeah, and one of the things that you know, over the years, it's kind of been taken apart a little bit, which has caused part of the problem. They've got a couple of walls that were taken down inside on the north end of the sort of northeast, whatever you want to call it, end of the building, where the maintenance shed is. A couple of the walls were taken out, and what happens, those walls are supporting walls
Right.
for the whole back end of the building. So you see the back end of the building is bowed a little bit. That's because there's nothing inside holding it together. So the question is for a contractor is, can that be fixed? You know, can they just pull the back wall back in and reconnect it so that the structure is solid? And the two ends, if anybody that goes by the park, you look at the grandstand, you can see both ends are wide open. So all the rain and the snow goes pouring in both ends and just sits there and goes down the inside. And I was in there with a contractor a number of years ago, and they told me the same thing that Jim said. The ends of those beams were rotten where they attached to the side end walls, and so the end walls just dropped. So again, that's a question for somebody who does this kind of thing to look at and say, can it be replaced?
Right.
Now, probably you don't want people running around inside of the building if you know it's got problems. So what do? You say that it's, you know, you can't use the building and we got to tear it down because it's a hazard. Well, the question is, can the hazard be fixed? Can it be repaired? Can somebody go in there that says, well, we can do this, 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 and the building's fine?
Right.
Of course, it has to meet codes that are today's codes and not ones from 40, 50, 60 years ago.
And I know this is all expensive, and you probably can't just have anybody go in and make the repairs, but, you know, there's a lot of contractors here, and some of them seem to be willing to come forward and donate their time if it's salvageable. Is that okay for people, you know, if you were to find out that it's salvageable, do you necessarily have to pay for the services?
Well, I with all the work that's got to be done over there, I can't imagine you're going to have enough volunteer work to repair the whole building. I mean, there are really, quite obviously, some main structure problems that need to be dealt with by somebody who handles that kind of thing. You can't just have some
No, I
guy,
know.
a normal everyday general contractor to go in and start dealing with beams and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you really need somebody who can deal with that. But there is going to be a lot of tearing off of boards and putting boards back on and general repair stuff that would need to be done. And that certainly, if you have enough contractors that are willing to come over and help and give a few hours here and there, it certainly would help a lot. I can bet that there are probably a lot of contractors in this city and surrounding communities that have played a few games of baseball on that field and certainly have a connection memory-wise to the days gone by when they were over there with Legion or Babe Ruth or even some of the old timers that are playing there now probably played there in high school.
So the response that everybody's getting on Facebook is quite amazing. With there was even one excavating company who said, well, if you need excavating work, we will do it. And so that's been good. Now if people, now you have to find out the condition. Here's another question is, Gardner Park floods, and it floods almost every year. I have my earliest photo I've been able to find, I think I sent it to you, and I can't particularly date it, but those were old passenger train cars over in the North Yard, which is now the Waterfront Plaza. So it was probably 1940s, and the stadium, well, the grandstand was even flooded back then. What impact has the flooding had on it?
Well, that grandstand is sitting on concrete pillars that are probably 3 or 4 feet
Oh.
above the ground. I mean, the ends of the building, obviously, when it floods, are in the water, but I don't think the main beams ever got into the water because they sat high enough up. What impact flooding had on those concrete pillars, whether they tilted or, how far in the ground are they for frost reasons, nobody knows. That's what we've got to find out.
Yeah, the main beams, if you go under the grandstand, you go the whole length of the grandstand, and these big cement pillars that are probably 4 feet high, probably a foot wide, and maybe 3 or 4 feet long. So they're quite massive, and the main beam is like 4 feet off the ground.
Right.
So anything that gets wet is generally the skirting around the entire building.
Right. In considering it's built on a swampy region, it doesn't look like there's been a lot of shift. Has there been? Like everything seems to be straight.
Well, if you look at the ridge line of the roof, I mean, without a level or
Right.
laser, whatever it is. It looks like it's pretty level.
Right.
That, it's not bowed
Right.
down. It looks like it's pretty.
It's
So
not like the problems that Vista used to have.
Yeah.
You know, that's built on a similar type of thing where, where things
Mm-hmm.
go like that. So what needs to be done next?
Well, I'll let Paul kind of address that a little bit, because I think that financing is one of the things that needs to be done, and you can't do it if you don't have the money. And Paul and Jim are kind of in charge of grants and those kinds of issues, so.
Well, one of the first things is to get who I consider an expert in to look at the building, because a plan from this committee will have to be presented to the city as far as that, and I think you need to, before you really get into all the finances, you have to determine whether it's salvageable or has to come down, and then I think the goal of the committee is if it had to come down, put a replica up.
Yeah.
Kind of like what they did at the Barton Fairgrounds, and I
Right.
believe Island Pond, I think they put a replica up out there also when they couldn't salvage it. So that's the first step. As far as the committee, we're looking to connect, since this committee is not part of the city, I've reached out to the Downtown Development Group
Right.
to become a subcommittee of the Downtown Development Group so that we can apply for grants. I spoke with a representative from NVDA and said that's one of the first things you're gonna wanna do is to connect with an organization that can apply for grants, because us as individuals, we can't just apply for all the various grants. And this person was naming several grants that this project would most likely qualify for. And it actually, people don't think of the grandstand as economic development,
Right.
but it really is. It
Sure.
ties into the outdoor recreational economy. You could have concerts, you can have other events at the park that brings in economic development. So there are grants out there that would help you restore it or build a replica, because it does tie into economic development.
Now, this is a little different question, but this is over in your neck of the woods, Jim, is, when did the grandstand over at, Veterans Park, which is now North Country, High School, when did that come down? I have photos of it, but.
Well, that had to have come down when they started building the high school in
what,
'67.
19
When I was a kid in high school, that grandstand was still there.
Was it used, or was it,
No,
yeah,
no, it wasn't used. I mean, the carnivals used to come years ago,
right,
and they'd set up behind the grandstand around the ends, but it was never used
yeah,
at
no.
that point.
I
I think that came down in the mid-'60s.
Yeah, about the time I was arriving on the scene in the world, but I've only seen photos of that one. So,
Well, there were two grandstands over there.
oh, was there?
There was a grandstand along the road
Yeah,
that probably we all remember.
right. Yeah, that
That was
one.
where all the pines were. There was
Yeah.
a great big grandstand there. But over at the other end of the park, where it loops into the parking lot for the Career Center, near where Jim used to live, and Jim Reed, there was a baseball grandstand over at that end.
Really?
And I have several aerial photos that show both of the grandstands over there. And I think in one of the articles that Paul might have dug up, it mentions the fact that the grandstand at Veterans Park was in quite disrepair, kind of falling apart and so on. And they were looking forward to getting to the new grandstand on Gardner Park. So, but if you look at the aerial photos of that area from back in the 40s and 50s, you'll see there were two grandstands there. One at the end where the Newport Frontiers used to play, and the grandstand along the road that I'm assuming was the grandstand used for the auto racing and the sulky races, because the barns were down towards where the American Legion is. But you'll see there were two grandstands on that field.
Right.
Yeah, the one I remember, the big one, it's set just about where the soccer field is in front of the high school
Yes.
at this point.
Yeah,
When I was a kid, we used to go over there and climb around in that structure. Probably shouldn't have been doing that, but back then, that was our playground.
So, so now back to Gardner Park. Here's a question. On Gardner Park, I've seen it lately, used as Gardner Memorial Park, and from a history perspective, I'm trying to figure out which one I'm supposed to be using. Is it still Gardner Park, or is it Gardner Memorial Park?
As far as I know, it's Gardner Park, but
Yeah, because it says right on the sign, Gardner Memorial Park, and I didn't know which, because I try to be historically accurate, so,
well, you probably are. If the sign says Gardner Memorial, that's probably what it is, but I've always called it Gardner Park.
Yeah, I think we always referred growing up as Gardner Park.
yeah, that's what I, named after
Yeah.
the mayor, I think, 1919 and 1921, he was the mayor.
Yeah, I think, Scott, the one thing that we really need to try to get across to everybody is that our goal is twofold.
Right.
The first part of our goal is to find out if the park, the building is salvageable,
Right.
and if it can be rebuilt. The second part is, we don't want people to just say, oh, they're just fixing a building.
Right.
We want to tie it into economic development, as Paul said, because there's so many things that could be done at Gardner Park, and we feel that can revitalize the economy of the city, get a lot of people in there. I can remember growing up, that Grandstand was full of people for ball games. And the other part of that is the recreational community. Having that park available for Legion ball games again, and for Babe Ruth ball games again, and for the old timers leagues, and for people to go over there and have that available. Softball tournaments, you can start organizing these things again. So we feel that it's more than just rebuilding the building.
Right.
It deals with the economic development and the recreational aspect of the city. And we feel that by getting that building usable again, that could have a real boost to the economy in the area as well as the recreational aspect.
Yeah, because to simply rebuild it and just keep going the way it is, setting it there really isn't very, practical. The one thing that comes up, and I'm sure, especially, both of you, are you a social media person?
My wife is, I am not.
It always astounds me when Newport, or practically any community, but particularly Newport with the hole in the ground. If you start working on the grandstand, well, that's great, but why aren't they focusing on the hole? No, those are different issues. And you can't, that pot of money for the grandstand, the grants can't be used in a hole that you can't touch anyways. But you must see that as the mayor to see everybody, every time you try to do something positive, all of a sudden, whoops, goes right back to the hole in the ground.
Well, the difference to me, Scott, is the grandstand at Gardner Park is a public-owned building.
Right.
Taxpayers pay for it. The hole in the ground, as the people call it on Main Street, the city does not own that.
Right.
That is owned by the receiver. We have no authority over that whatsoever.
Exactly, but it always comes back.
It does, and it will, yeah.
Well, and we don't want to go backwards. We don't want to start pointing fingers and placing blame and saying, they should have done this, somebody should have done that. But it's done and over with.
Yep.
Put it behind us. What do we have to do now going forward? So we have to look at the building and say, this needs to be repaired here, this needs to be repaired. Can it be done and salvage the building and make it usable again? That's our number one goal. And if it can, our second goal is to do it, and at the same time, while doing it, work with helping the economics of the area and the recreational possibilities of the area. So this is not just let's fix the building and set it here and let it rot for another 50 years. Let's fix it and use it.
I've done a lot of research on other grandstands that have been restored throughout the country, and they've all tied it into economic development. One big restoration project out west, now I can't remember the name of the town, but they tied it into where they were having all sorts of events on the field, from concerts to, they even had tractor pulls. I don't think we want a tractor pull there, but they had tractor pulls and various events. One thing that I think some people forget too is the Clyde River is part of the Northern Border Canoe Trail, and that goes right up the Clyde. So an idea would be, when you restore the building, you build it in such a way that there's a concession in the back where you could have kayak and canoe rentals.
Yep.
In the back of it, because people forget that the canoe trail goes right up through the whole northern border, right down Memphremagog, up the Clyde River.
Absolutely.
And, you know, people that can't think that you can't, and you can't canoe all the way up the Clyde River, you have to take it out and, what do you call it, foraging, not foraging,
Yeah.
walking, I forget the exact term,
Yeah.
to connect to the other.
It's called portage.
Portage,
portage.
thank you, I couldn't say foraging, portage. So you take it out, and then you go to the next part of the river, and so they forget that, and actually, if you wanna launch canoes and kayaks, that's a great spot, because it's sheltered there in the river versus the big lake, or even the
Over in
side
the
of, even in the bay towards the Long Bridge. So that's an aspect of the restoration too, that ties right into the economy, and that could be promoted more, that
Yeah.
whole canoe trail.
And I'm not in any way suggesting we move music Wednesdays on the waterfront over there, because I personally think Wednesdays on the waterfront is one of the best things to happen to the city. But you could have other events, you know, similar events over in the park as well.
Well, the city has a portable stand that you can wheel right over in front of the grandstand, and a band can perform on that stand. So you could have a crowd in the grandstand, you could have that out front with your band and so on. And that can be done any number of times, and just when you're done, just wheel it away.
That could be a weekend thing.
Sure.
I don't wanna do away
Fi-
Wednesday
you
on
wanna do a
waterfront.
fish festival?
Wednesdays on the waterfront are kind of established.
Right.
It draws a big crowd, so we certainly don't wanna interfere with that, but.
Do you want to announce that do you want to make a public announcement that you want fish to return and bring 75,000 people to Gardner Park?
I don't know if we want that many.
But I've told you all the things I'm not good at. I'm not a good builder. I can't do baseball, but you don't want me on a singing stage either. So
Yeah.
just to let you know.
Join the crowd.
Yeah, join the crowd, if I sang, you would evacuate.
Well, one of the, you know, it's simple little things that could be done over there. You know, you've got baseball that can be played there all the time. When I was growing up and we had our group that used to play at the park, when everybody used to head home, I lived right across the river. Charlie Bishop, who was a good friend of mine, who was down playing ball with us, we'd go over and play wiffle ball up against the screen in front of the grandstand. So somebody mentioned, why couldn't you hold wiffle ball tournaments over there? You could hold them in the summer, you could hold them in the winter, you could build a backdrop of a Fenway Park, the Green Monster, and hold wiffle ball tournaments. Travis Roy has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions, several million, in the wiffle ball tournament they used to hold in his name. Now, we might not reach that level, but if you're doing tournaments and you're raising $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 with each one, you know, you could have that go to a specific cause, like the playground and different areas like that over there, where you could help raise money with all these different activities to help fund those projects.
Okay, we only have about 5 more minutes left, so when is somebody going to be looking at it?
Well, that's a good question. You know, you've got to find the right person. We think we have found the right person.
We talked about it beforehand.
Right,
I think
and
you're right.
we need to obviously need to contact that person, find out their schedule, get them down here so we can go in there and look at it. And this is an individual who has expertise in moving and dealing with large structures.
Including the church on East Main Street.
Sure, you've got people around that have that expertise, and we don't want to just. I mean, if you look at the reports, well, it's the insurance company says it's a hazard and all that. Sure, it might be a hazard now, but can you fix it so that it's not a hazard?
Right.
So that's, to us, that's the question. We know there are serious problems over there, but can those serious problems be fixed? And that's what we want to do first. Can we do it? And if we can do it, we need to go full bore ahead. I've seen all kinds of responses on Facebook all the way from Burlington and other parts of the country of young kids who grew up here, played Legion ball here, and said, wow, they can't tear that down. I can remember going there and watching all my kids grow up playing ball on that field. Those kinds of things. 1951, I was 8 years old. Frank Toll was hired by the city to run the first ever organized Little League baseball program in the city. I played on that. I remember going home and asking my mother for $2 to buy a uniform and to pay for insurance. And that was the beginning of my experience on Gardner Park. I grew up on Gardner Park.
You know,
and many others did.
yeah, I think we're moving pretty well, Scott.
Right.
You gotta remember, we're 3 days past our first committee meeting, so.
Yeah. No, I
So
think,
we're
I
doing
really,
all right.
I really do.
Yeah.
I think this is really, I think it's really taken on, a lot of good speed. And personally, I might love my history, but I think we have to really respect whatever the structural people say, because I don't know what the saying is, but not to put good money over bad or
Throw
something.
good money after
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, and so you need to be careful of that. But I think we got to respect the, because I think we can, to do anything else is it's just gonna be a waste.
A lot of people don't understand the history of the park. One of the greatest pitchers in the history of baseball, Satchel Paige,
That's what
pitched at Gardner Park. Robin Roberts of the Philadelphia Phillies pitched at Gardner
Yeah.
Park. The House of Davids from the Negro League played at Gardner Park. I can remember Roland Guyette, who played for Newport High School, 87 years old to this month, just moved to a rest home in Middlebury. I can remember him playing against the Plattsburgh Air Force Base team at Gardner Park with JoJo Haney, Billy Buchanan, Gene Lyons. The grandstand was full of people, and it holds between 700 and 800 people. No reason why those days can't be brought back.
And we feel it's worth saving if it's possible.
Right.
It may not be possible, and that's what we want to find out. But if you look at the city, there aren't that many historical structures left, and that's one of maybe 5 that I can think of right at the top of my head.
I look at it that is, you need to try to preserve your history, but also look to the future,
Yes.
And that's the key thing. You try to preserve the history, but always look to the future of the community.
Right.
One thing I just want to have to get a plug in for, we have a Facebook page.
Right.
It's Restore the Grandstand. and we'll
Restore
be-
the Gardner Park grandstand.
Grandstand. That's on Facebook. We're going to have a website, so people will be able to follow the progress. And I know part of the goal of the Facebook and the webpage was to try to get people to post stories of their memories. And so we're going to keep that updated with that progress.
I'd like to, I can't find many old I found one old photo of it, and so that'd be great. I will say this in closing, Roger. You at least picked up a safer pastime than your father, who was a very well-known boxer whose name was Hub Parker, and so I suppose baseball was far better than being popped in the nose.
Well, I was the athletic one in the family. Although my 2 brothers both were good ball players, but my mother would never, ever let me go watch my father box because she was afraid I'd become a boxer.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
glad she didn't.
So who would like the final words?
Well, I think that we would like to get people in the community involved. We would like them to at least keep track of what we're doing at the beginning here, to see if this is salvageable. And if we can, it's a huge project. And we're going to need a lot of people to support us. We're going to need a lot of financial support. We're maybe looking at, somebody wants to name the grandstand after their corporation, whatever. We're looking at that, but that, again, is something that it's owned by the city, so we've got to deal with the city with that. And so we've got a lot of things going, a lot of irons in the fire. We're just really getting started, and we hope that people will give us a chance to get rolling here, and we'll get involved. You've got the 3 of us. You've got Joel Collins, who's involved, and Steve Edgley, who is involved as members of the committee, and they're all doing important stuff here. And so please contact us if you have questions. Keep involved and keep track. We want to keep the history of the city alive.
And we want to get people involved, as Roger says, not only for if it can be restored or even if it can be replaced, one built in its place. And when we see salvage, Roger brought this up the other day, either salvage or restored in whole or in part.
Right.
The ends may have to be, the idea was taking out,
Yeah,
reducing the
makes
size, taking the ends off if the middle's good, and that type of thing. There's a lot of options
Right.
that we need to explore, but we're hoping.
Okay. All right. Thank you, folks, for coming on, and I have to commend you because it went from a newspaper blurb to a, now it's gaining some momentum, and we'll see what the future brings.
It's been a long time getting the momentum. I had my picture taken with Andy Capella, who was a rec director, 5 or 6 years ago, standing on the pitcher's mound in front of the grandstand. And we tried to get something started back then, and it just kind of fizzled. You just couldn't get anything going. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Starts with a newspaper article, and
Right.
here we go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.